Okay, good evening, everyone, and all those watching us live on Facebook. And the topic, I'm telling you something I love. Both sides. One is the healing power of the mind and how it works, and connectivity enhances that. And of course, the expert, Dr. Roshan Jain, is here. So, Doctor, thank you so much, sir, for being here and for sparing your time with us. I know how busy you are, but at the same time, the amount of good philanthropic work you do is always going to be noticed by us and is always going to be applauded. Overall, our intention is to make the world a more positive place, especially at this time when we are having all these problems, doubts, insecurities. We all need positive energy every day. And let me tell you that positive energy is what keeps our immune system up as well. When we are in a negative frame of mind, when we are fearful, when we are angry, we tend to deplete our own immune systems. So please keep that in mind. If you're fearful of something, you're more likely to be hit by a low immune system, and therefore the disease has the upper hand. So that's something from my side. But to know more about this, let the inimitable Dr. Roshan Jain take over and give us a brief run into why this topic, why now. Dr. Roshan Jain, why the healing power of connectivity, and why at this point of time? The floor is all yours, sir.
I think over the last 16 months or so, we've been surrounded by the terminology like fear, anxiety, depression, not as much as death, infection, hospitalization, and complications of corona infection. And I think we need to introduce the positive tone to what we've been conversing all along about hospitals, about infections, about deaths, about medicines, and so on. We need to bring in positive words like healing, power, and connectedness and connectivity, right? Because these are the words that have wondered everybody. These are the very things that we had given up during a pre-pandemic days with the digital era, with the social media, with the advent of other devices, that we had given up connectedness in the real world and we moved on to the virtual world. We thought real world connections were not as important. Quality was not important. We were focusing on quantity. We wanted thousands of followers, thousands of friends on social medias, having very few or none to stand by you when you needed them. We had ignored connectedness when we were slapped with the pandemic, and that situation hasn't passed. We realized the importance that connectedness and connectivity is more important than anything else that we will think about and wonder in the next few years to come.
Excellent. Dr. Roshan, thank you so much, sir. And this is something I've been talking about for a long time. So even I'm also been a counselor for about 37 years.
Yes.
So I see that the people who are more positive, in fact, I've checked this with a lot of hospital staff. They said the people who come in positive and say, "Kya hai, boss? And I'll be out of here soon." Those are the guys who recover fast. Yeah. The people who are all the time, what is this? What is that? Am I okay? Am I going to survive? Are the ones who actually take the biggest hit. Because the enemy is inside them. It's the fear that's actually taking away your energy. Would you like to say something on that, Dr. Roshan?
I think you hit it rightly, and WHO has very clearly defined health as a state of physical, psychological, and social well-being.
Wow.
But we in India completely emphasize on the body and bodily ailments. We have not given enough emphasis to mind, our emotions, thoughts, and feelings. Science is very, very clear that the body and mind are interlinked. When the ailments of the body affect you, and if the mind is of unsound health, if the emotions are all over the place, then the recovery is slower, uptake of medicine is slower, and the time to come out of your difficulties is much slower. The suffering is also prolonged. When the mental health improves, when the person talks about how they feel, the emotive elements of an ailment, whether it's physical or psychological, the recovery is better. So we now understand in the hospital setting itself that we need to give equal or more emphasis to the mind as much as we give to the body. And this has been there in the WHO Constitution since its inception, but we've never been given enough importance. The physical, the psychological, social, and now we also include the spiritual elements to it.
Nice.
So all that together we call as holistic. But when we look at ourselves, we don't look at it in a holistic way. We only think about the body. If it's not body, if it's not visible, then it's not there. And that's what you and me are trying to do, to bring the mind into the forefront,
equation
ahead of the body.
Yeah, tremendous. And I'm so glad you brought this holistic healing part of it out, Dr. Roshan. I read somewhere that they said 90% of our problems are psychosomatic. The psyche creates the problem in the soma or the body.
Yes.
Would you like to say something about that, Dr. Roshan?
worldwide studies, again by WHO, has very clearly suggested that 2/3 of any consultation with any physicians or any doctors are psychological or psychosomatic, that they have the roots in the mind, if they have the root in the psyche, in the psychology. Consequently, all physicians and doctors must be giving equal or more importance to the mind. You're perhaps right that 90% of people have psychological issues. We all have mind, we all have suffering. Even if it's not emotional health, if it's physical health, then there is the psychological suffering that goes with it.
And earlier, doctor, psychology was mostly looking at what was the problem with the patient. Modern positive psychology, especially propounded by people like Viktor Frankl and all that, or Marcus Buckingham has written even in Management, the psychology of the positivity.
Yeah.
Would you like to just give us a hint of what is that about, so that we look at it from a doctor's point of view?
Viktor Frankl is very, very well quoted everywhere. His experiences in the Holocaust and his survival during that suffering, a period of suffering, and the aftermath of the Holocaust was because of the positive attitude he put onto the suffering. And that's what the positive psychology generally refers to as, to have a state of mind where if you think negatively about things, then the suffering is enhanced. If you think positively, being optimistic, to think good in something, to think good about the outcome, then whether the outcome changes or not, but the journey certainly changes. And that's what positive psychology is, to say that when we don't have control over the outcomes, we certainly should try to control the journey itself.
Okay, so that's another brilliantly put statement there. Doc, would you like to also tell us about, the aspect of the connectivity? They say people who are more connected, like a tribe, they thrive. But people who are loners or separate, they tend to wither away and they tend to, fall apart on themselves. Would you like to just say something about that in passing?
A lot of studies have been done on loneliness, for example. So people who are isolated, people who are disconnected, especially in the Western countries, they've done a lot of studies on loneliness, and they found that lack of connectedness and isolation has negative impact on health. And some of the studies in the 80s and 90s very clearly suggested that the lack of connectedness is perhaps as or more dangerous than smoking, than obesity and hypertension. It has more negative impact. So, and consequently, they start to realize that we need to connect with people. We need to get back into the commune and community. We need to get back into networking and relatedness. Having worked outside and in India, I think we are blessed by that sense of community and commune and of relatedness and of society, wherein not just that we have a sense of belonging and sense of purpose and sense of identity, but we also have a natural network to support us through difficult times and through grief and so on. Many examples. In the West, for example, when you grieve and mourn, you have to seek help from psychologists, from counselors, from psychiatrists. In India, historically, we had the tradition of grieving with the family, of families coming and helping you to work through the denial and disbelief and anger and frustration and depression, and gently take you to the point of acceptance. And that was the power of grieving and mourning in together as a community, as a society, as a family. We are rapidly moving away from all that. We are breaking that down, wanting to go the Western way, wanting to become isolated, wanting to become self-centered. And I think the self-centeredness is not helping anybody. And certainly the West has demonstrated with an enormous amount of study that lack of connection is going to be harmful for your health. And when you talk about the opposite, connectedness has shown to improve quality of life. Wow. It is shown to improve longevity. The studies have shown that there's a 50% increase in likelihood of living longer, healthier, and happier life if you are well connected. If many of you have read a book called Ikigai, and where they talk about the island in Okinawa, in Japan, where you have the longest centurion and older people, because of when people retire, they don't retire, they retire from the work, but they take up something else. They continue to maintain commune and community and contacts and networks. And they've been so heavily emphasized in that book to say that if you want to live long, you have to be connected.
Ikigai. I think I'm just going to stop there for 1 second, Doc. I want them to learn this Ikigai. That's the name of the book. Let me tell you, it's worth reading the book. because it's such a positive book. And, it's also like the French equivalent of the raison d'être, the reason for being. And the community helps that in such a big way. And also the other communities around the world. I think there are 7 communities where people live 100 plus quite comfortably.
Yes.
So yes, sorry, doctor, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and this we realize, having worked outside India for many years and worked in India for many years, I realize the value of being connected, being part of the community, being never alone, and always for people to be there. Tomorrow, if you have an illness in India, you'll have several people standing outside the hospital, several people rushing into the hospital to help and support you and ask you. There's no dearth of people wanting to be there for you, just standing even outside the hospital. That will not happen outside the country. We are very, very lonely. We are very isolated. It's very, very unsatisfactory. And the consequences of that loneliness, of that being broken away from the community, is apart from the physical health and longevity, the mental health is also very negatively affected. The sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, the sense of identity, the increase in anxiety and depression, increase in rates of suicide are much higher in societies where loneliness has become an epidemic. So I think we need to think all of that in a different way. And the pandemic has taught us, is opened the eyes for us. It's glaring in our face to say that isolation and loneliness is not good. And I think when we come out of it, we're going to be thinking everything in a different angle.